What's up, everybody? I'm Abatage, and welcome to this HLTB Fantasy Critic League 101 introduction, if you will. This is a video that I'm putting together for anyone who might be interested in the league, if you've seen it around in the forum, on the Discord, and maybe you've been wondering what the hell is all this about. Maybe I'm feeling like I want to sign up for the 2022 league, but I really don't know what's going on. This will hopefully at least point you in the right direction of how you can find out more information, as well as another video I'm going to do later on, which will get into some more of the nitty-gritties about, signing up and the draft and that kind of thing. But for now, we're just going to look at what it is and have a quick little overview. So essentially, this website here that we're looking at is fantasycritic.games, and that is where the entire thing takes place. It's a version of fantasy football, but for video games. So we score points based on how well video games do when they're released. And it's all based on whatever score a video game gets on opencritic.com. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is come to fantasycritic.games and sign up for free. Now, of course, I already have an account, so I just logged in. And initially, you're not going to have any leagues in this area here. And you may not have anything in this area as well, because this is all part of established leagues that you have going on. Something you may want to look at is the popular public leagues section down the bottom right here at the bottom of the page. These are all leagues that you can have a look at without taking part. So if you wanted to have a look at some active leagues, this is the place to go if you wanted to check that out. Or you can find a link to the How Long to Beat League either in our forum or on our Discord. And right now I'm going to use our league just to show you what the deal is. So let's go to that. So this is our current league for 2021. And right at the top of the page, you can see these are our standings. This is our leaderboard. So each user that's taking part of the league has created a publisher, which is just a fictional publisher. It's just a name really to name your team, for want of a better word. And then each publisher has drafted and selected a bunch of games that they thought were going to come out during 2021 that basically make up their team. So as an example, let's have a look at mine. So my username is Abatage, obviously, and my publisher is called Abisoft. So if I click on that, it'll take me to Abisoft. So you can see this box here is where all of my information is for my team. So my team name is Abisoft, my player is Abatage, and you can see these are the games that I've picked throughout the year that I thought would perhaps get a good score and earn me points as the year progressed. The first 5 games are games that we drafted at the beginning of the year. So these are games that you pick right at the beginning of the year that you think are going to score highly. The other half of the roster are games that we've picked during the year. This is to allow for, say, at the beginning of the year, a game that has not been announced. Perhaps it gets announced at E3 in the middle of the year. And so you can then draft it to your team going, oh, I think that's going to do well. And the very final one is a counter pick. And this is a pick that we make during the draft, which is a game that someone else has drafted that we think is actually not going to do well and or not going to release. So how do you earn points anyway? Well, you might have noticed that in the columns to the right here, each game has a critic score, and then there's a column for points based on that score. And the key number to remember is 70. You can see my total points are at 70, but that's just an average and the total of everything added up together. Basically, every point that you get over 70, you earn a point. So for Ninja Gaiden Master Collection, that only earns 72, so it gave me 2 points. Likewise, The Artful Escape got 80, so that earned me 10 points. One of my best games was Hitman 3, which was the first game I drafted, and that got 86 on the OpenCritic, so I earned 16 points for that one. Likewise, for points that are under 70, you lose points. So for Origami 2, which only got 64 on OpenCritic, I lost 6 points. Now, it's not strictly one-to-one for losing points, because the lower you get, the less points you lose. It's a bit of a ratio thing. So it's a system that's in place on the site to stop having one bad game ruin your entire league. So if you get a bad game that's worth, say, 50 points, you're not going to lose 20 points. You might lose 15 instead, or whatever the ratio is. I'm not sure 100%. But essentially, it's not going to tank your whole year ahead of you. The idea is that if you have a bad game, sure, it's going to hurt you because you're going to lose those points. However, because you lose less points the lower it goes, if you get a really bad game, it hopefully won't ruin your chances completely. Whereas in previous years, if you got, say, a 50 or something, you might as well count yourself out right from the get-go and you're no longer competitive. At the same time, if a game does not release, such as Everwild here, which has been confirmed will not release, and if we click on it, we can see the release date is set to 2023 or later, estimated. So that means that the most reliable information that is available right now for Everwild and its release date is that it's estimated to be about 2023. However, the reason I picked it and the reason it's on my list is because originally it was set to release during 2021. So I thought, hey, if this comes out this year, I reckon that'll be a good bet. Although clearly I was wrong because it has been delayed to 2023. Hence, I've got 0 points for that game. So sometimes, especially with your counter pick, it might be smarter to choose a game that you're not sure if it will release as opposed to a game that could potentially lose points. Mostly because a game that doesn't release is only worth 0, whereas a game that like Origami 2 that loses points will take points away. And that was my bet with Sports Story as well. I think Sports Story would score well when it comes out. However, the release date is TBA, and I don't think it's coming out in 2021. And I'm feeling more confident about that as the year draws to a close. So my counter pick was more of a bet that this game won't come out. I wasn't betting that it won't do well. So I'm hoping for a 0 on that one. Because otherwise, if we look over here at Cockroach Content Corp, Neo, The World Ends With You, got 82 on OpenCritic. So because this is a counter pick, Matt lost 12 points because it earned 12 points for the person who originally picked that game. And that's the risk of a counter pick. You're betting that a game someone else picked is going to do badly. And when that happens, you earn points for the scores that are under 70 and you lose points for the scores that are over. Basically the opposite of everything else in your roster. So as the year goes by and games get released, you get points that add up and you end up on a leaderboard. And as you can see, Alex5101 with Funky Face Studios is sitting pretty on top and has 99.64 points. And you can see that he's still got 2 games unreleased, whereas say Frozen Roy with Frozen Frog is firmly in second place, but all of their games have been released because they're expecting 0. The budgets we'll look at in another video where I talk about drafting and picking and that kind of thing, but it's not something to worry about in this introduction. The other thing I just want to show you is the league options. So because I'm the league manager, I have all these options on the left here. And you can see there's public actions, which means things that everyone can see. There's player actions, which are things that only players can see. And then there's manage league, which is stuff that only I can see. However, I just want to look at the league options because this shows you what's going on behind the scenes when you join a league. So essentially, these are all set before the draft happens, which is before the league kind of begins. And these are all the options that govern what happens during our game. So each publisher will pick 10 games. That's the total standard games. 5 of them are drafted. That means they're all picked at the very beginning of the year. 5 of them are pickup games. So that means that throughout the year, there's space for 5 more games to be added to your roster as they're announced or as you feel like adding them. And we have 1 counter pick, which is that final pick on the roster that is someone else's game that you think is going to do badly. Then we have a minimum bid amount, which means when you bid on a new game, you have to spend at least $1, so you can't get them for free. Again, we'll talk about bidding and stuff in another video down the track, so don't worry about that right now. And then we've got options for when you can drop a game. This means that if you've already picked the game on your roster, when is it appropriate for you to drop that game and think, I want to get rid of this game because I don't think it's going to do well or I don't think it's going to release, but I want to get rid of it so that I've got another space that I can put in another game where I think that's going to do well. So for our current league, we are not allowed to drop any old game that is unreleased. Like there are limitations. You can't just drop anything. So we're not allowed to drop any unreleased game. We can drop any will not release game. And we can drop 1 game that is set to still release. So basically, if it has a release date within the league year of 2021, we can drop 1 game that is set to release. We can drop any that are set to will not release, if you can remember from my roster before how Everwild is set to not release. However, this only applies to drafted games. So essentially, these rules are only applicable to the first 5 games in our roster that we picked at the beginning of the year. And these rules are kind of there as a risk reward because you're essentially betting on game releases. So this kind of prevents you from like just betting on any old thing. And then as soon as you find out it's not going to do well, dropping it and replacing it with something that you know you will. Like if you pick a dud game, you have to kind of stick with it. And that's kind of what this is, tailored for. At the same time, if someone else has counter-picked a game you want to drop, you can't drop it because we've got counter-pick blocks drops on yes. Similarly, there's a bunch of tags. Now, these tags are set to every game in the database. And, it's a pretty extensive database. And basically, when you're picking games, you can't pick games that have any of these tags. So if a game has been cancelled, you can't pick it. That seems to make sense. If a game is in early access, you can't pick it. if a game is a director's cut. And there's some examples there of like Persona 5 Royale as opposed to Persona 5, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. These are games that have already been released but are receiving a director's cut. So the reason behind this tag is more because if it's already been released and this is a director's cut, you should have a pretty good idea about what score it's going to get. So it's less of a gamble. That's why it's kind of banned. Same with like early access. Like the other thing about early access is that often early access games don't get scored. So if a game is in early access already, it means that OpenCritic score will either already be there, or quite often those early access games won't even get a score until they reach like a 1.0 release. So it's not worth drafting it because it just makes it a bit messy and not as reliable. The other one is an expansion pack because it's not a full game. A straight port, which, again, because it's already been released, a straight port kind of, Doom 16 on Switch, you kind of know that's probably going to get a good score just because Doom 2016 in general has had a good score. Released internationally, so a game that's already been released outside of North America. Now, this can be gamed a little. Like there have been a few games that have come up that are released internationally but haven't been recognized as such for a whole bunch of reasons that aren't worth going into right now. However, the point is that if a game that's released internationally might already have a score, there might already be some buzz about how well it's doing. So picking it ahead of its more North American release can be like gaming the system again. Like you already know what score it's going to get. And finally, yearly installment is similar, again, like Madden, FIFA, Football Manager. These are games that are pretty much the same every year. So they're probably going to get around the same kind of score every year. They're just the ban tags. The other tags that are things that we've allowed are things like total remasters, because obviously like remakes and remasters. Because if you think of like Resident Evil 2 remaster, you can't base the score of that based on the original Resident Evil 2 because it's a completely different game. And that's why those sorts of games are allowed, and why straight ports, which are the original, just ported to a different platform, why they're not allowed. Hopefully that makes sense, but we'll go into that in more detail in another video. And then also this is a public league, which means anyone can look at it, and it's not a test league. So a test league basically is just a toggle where you can... it doesn't actually count, and you can muck around and test things out and that sort of thing. And that's something that you may want to do to learn Fantasy Critic itself. That's what it looks like for a league, but there's also a few more things that you may want to look at on the website. And up the top here, there's an excellent FAQ on the site, which has a whole lot of information that is worth reading through and checking out. And I know it can be a bit boring to read through a whole bunch of stuff, but if you really want to know how the game works, this is an excellent resource. There's also a how to play link, which kind of breaks it down as in say, well, you create a league first, and you plan your draft, and you draft your games, blah, blah, blah. And that's just a quick page, which is really good to read as well. So hopefully all of that and everything I've shown you in our own league will be a good help to kind of at least give you an overview about what the hell this Fantasy Critic League thing is. So as I said, this is just an introduction to the entire concept, and I'm going to make another video about actually drafting games and picking up games and bidding for games and how it works when the league has actually started. So keep an eye out for that as well if you're interested and you want to take part. So final thought, we will be opening signups for the 2022 league during December. So by the end of December, we can close signups and begin the draft in the first week of January 2022, because we want to do the draft sooner rather than later so that some of those games that are released early in the year, such as Elden Ring, which is due in January, they can be drafted nice and early because we'll have the draft done hopefully in the first week of January. Last thought, final thought. If you do want to take part in the 2022 league and you have not taken part before, please be aware that you'll need to be available in some capacity during the first week of January, or you will need to set up an auto draft, which is where you pick all your games ahead of time and let the system just pick games for you. Again, I'll go into that more in in later videos. However, that's the biggest commitment there is to this whole game. For the rest of the year, you get to drop in and out whenever you feel like it. But because we're all in different time zones and everything, as the How Long to Beat family that we are, sometimes the draft can take a long time because ultimately we're all in different time zones. And we have to take it in turns to pick games in that first week. Generally, it takes about a week to get through the draft. So just be aware that that is a commitment that, will exist. But for now, hopefully this has been a little bit informative, and keep an eye out for future videos where I will go into much more detail. Adios.